Welcome. Let's discover the eye-opening truth about codependency and the tools to break free. This video is about empowering yourself with the knowledge to reclaim your independence and thrive. I'm going to be talking about how to recognize the patterns and behaviors of codependency and some of the tools that I have learned over the years that can allow us to be in a recovery with ourselves. I'm going to get into more of what I mean by that in a minute. Because when we are in a recovery with ourselves, it allows us to stay into a practice versus allowing these patterns to ruin aspects of our life and our relationships. Let's get free together. I first started learning about codependency when I was the young age of 16 years old. I was dating someone, and the mother of this individual, who's a lovely, lovely woman, came to me and told me about a program called Al-Anon. I did not attend Al-Anon right away. I'm not here telling you you need to go to Al-Anon, but I will say if you are not able to work through these things with the tools I'm about to give you in this video, then it's a good option. At that time in my life, I was in relationships with people who had a lot of addiction issues, and I wasn't able to really see my own at that point. And what I mean is a lot around addictions to thinking. I believe our biggest addiction as humanity is our addiction to thinking. And codependency is at the root of all addiction. Some people choose to manifest it through eating or drinking too much or using drugs or shopping too much or gambling. The list goes on. But at the core for me, it was about trying to control, wanting to be right about how other people needed to live their lives, or trying to fix them or change them, or changing myself in order to be liked in a relationship, trying to make someone who I wanted to be, or trying to make myself who I thought they wanted me to be. I was in some fantasy land of a world where I wasn't living in reality. When we're in this place, we think, well, they need to change. And the reality is, no, you need to change. We think, oh, well, they have a problem. No, you have the problem. I had the problem. The problem is that we were not living in reality. We're living in the fantasy world where we have this expectation of them where they need to bend to our will. They need to do what we think is right. They need to live in a way that we think is better than the way that they are living currently. They don't need to do that. They get to do exactly what they want to do with their life. It is their life. So codependency originates in a dysfunctional or a traumatic childhood. And those experiences that that child may have had, it really negated their independence. So the child became stuck emotionally at the age that they experienced the intense emotional pain. And so they grew up to be adults who were kind of stuck emotionally at that younger age. This makes adult relationships very challenging. And for that young child, this is the big one. Their sense of self was confused, or perhaps they never really got the opportunity to develop a sense of self because their parents wanted them to be so identified with who they were that they really didn't know who they were in their soul. And this isn't about blaming our parents or our ancestors. Codependency has run through many, many generations and probably hundreds and hundreds of years. But here's the rub. Self-love is an essential building block of a mature, healthy relationship. And in our world, we need a lot more mature, healthy relationships. And instead, we see people acting out their attachment wounding, anxious, avoidant, or a combination of both. And you're not self-regulated when you are in an anxious or avoidant kind of relationship. So if you're not self-regulating, then that means that it makes it very challenging for you to co-regulate within a relationship with someone you care about. Bottom line, it starts with us. It starts with us coming back to, how do I develop a core sense of self with myself? How do I self-regulate? And this is nervous system work, and this is also mental thinking work, as well as emotional mastery work. So there are certain things to be discussed around codependency. Of course, I mentioned boundaries. I'm going to get into that more in just a moment. And then there's also learning about our deep fear of commitment. I have found that most people who are in a codependent relationship think they want commitment, but they actually fear intimacy and commitment deeply. And so looking at that fear and the dynamic of wanting intimacy but fearing it at the same time. There's a part of us that has maybe given too much in our relationships, and maybe we have become the martyr or we've become the victim. I remember when I went to my very first Al-Anon meeting, I went there to fix like 2 different family members and the relationship that I was in at the time, only to find that I was looking in the mirror, that I was not there actually to fix them, that I was there to work on me. I thought they were the problem. Turns out I was the problem. I had to see what parts of me, what aspects of me were attracting these unhealthy, addictive relationships. And I had to learn how to be compassionate to myself when I made mistakes. And that's one of the things I want to impart on you today. Can you become a more compassionate person to yourself? Are there really mistakes? I don't know. I think everything's happening for us to learn and to evolve. But codependency is rooted in looking for love outside of ourselves. And so what we do is we place a lot of shame at the heart of codependency. When we're dependent on something outside of ourselves, there's a lot of shame in that, and we might not even know at first. So part of this first step of codependency is acknowledging that we need to be kinder, more compassionate, and we also need to acknowledge where we're holding shame. Where are we looking outside of ourselves for safety, security, to feel better? And then the next part is we must come to terms with our family of origin for recovery and healing. We got to look to see also where we've become people pleasers in our life, where our perfectionism has started to hinder us. And then, of course, we look to where we need to hold different levels of boundaries. Recovery means to recover ourself. I love that definition, to recover all the parts of ourselves, all of them, not just the bright and the shiny parts. For me, recovery is a very holistic word. It means the whole self. We get honest and we comprehend and accept the areas that we've had dysfunctional patterning. And then we start to look at how we can give ourselves a lot more self-love around those dysfunctional patterns. We look to the areas where we might need more healing and recovery. And there's affirmations and there's meditations, but I can tell you, those do not compare to doing the work of recovery on yourself when you look at all of the aspects of who you are. Some of our codependent character traits can be turned into our finest characteristics. We learn to become responsible for ourselves first and foremost. We take our attention from what's going on outside of us and with those people and those experiences and those big news headlines and all of that, and we consistently keep coming back as a practice to ourselves. For example, if we see that we're struggling with boundaries, perhaps we've learned not to have many boundaries since our childhood. Or maybe we've learned to have no boundaries. Maybe we have had so many boundaries, they've become extremely rigid. Everyone's different. We can start to see that setting boundaries is important, and it also signals to other people that we care about ourselves. And boundaries are one of the biggest things that can counter codependence. As we learn to hold different kinds of boundaries, which maybe I'll make a whole other video on that, it allows us to attract a complete different kind of relationship with individuals, with our career, with our food, with our body, with everything. But the thing is about boundaries, and the nuance that I want to share, is the most important boundary to me is the boundary that we have with our thinking. If we are paying attention to where we're directing our thoughts, if we become skilled at questioning our thoughts and where we're giving our attention and our power away within our thoughts, that to me is one of the most important boundaries we can set. We often think of boundaries as like keeping people away, but boundaries are really more about what we need to do for ourselves. So we have physical and internal boundaries. And if we are not holding these, then we remain victims in our life, and we attract situations where people believe everything that we say, and then they find out that we're not being authentic, or people walk all over us, or they get at us, or they bully us, or I don't know. There's so many examples, but the bottom line is that we continue this cycle that keeps us into victimhood, where we are being harmed in some way. And the reality is we are only being harmed because we are not taking care of ourselves. Now, I understand that there's so many different situations that people find themselves in, and people are like, well, I can't leave. And I understand. I do. And there's always options that we have. There's always options. And part of the boundary is getting out of our own way so we can really see the options. Many families have dysfunction. It's really those children who grew up to be adults that tolerate situations that aren't healthy for them because they believed in some idealized or fantasy version of someone or something. Codependency is about not living in reality. It's about this fantasy that we live in. So we try to change the environment and the people and the situations that are outside of our control. I found that when we stop trying to change everything out there and controlling the external is when the opportunities, the insight, the revelations start to open up to us on what we need to do next to take care of ourselves or our families. I want to help you focus on how to be in recovery with codependency. And in my personal experience of doing this work for well over 2 decades, almost 3, it's this combination of reparenting yourself. So it's giving yourself the parenting that you always felt that you needed and didn't get, while combining it with a lot of self-love. Our capacity for self-love filters our whole experience of the world. So if we're loving ourselves deeply, we see the world completely different. If we're shaming ourselves and our biggest critics, we see the world completely differently. If we don't trust people, then we see the world completely differently. If we trust inherently in God, universe, and ourselves, we see the world differently. So this practice of self-love is about our ability to be in practice. And notice I say that. It's, to me, a practice that we choose every day. It's not like you wake up one day and say, okay, I've arrived. I love myself. Now I can move on. This practice is an integrative practice of all the elements. What I mean by that is there's dark aspects to all of us, dysfunctional ones, the admirable aspects, the not so admirable aspects. We have all of it within us as humanity. We have parts of ourselves that we don't even want to acknowledge or look at because we feel shame around it, like I mentioned earlier in this video. So what this is, it's about bringing forward all of these things, viewing the whole of ourselves, and learning to love every single part of ourselves and every aspect that we see. Because if we don't do this, then we are lacking in self-love. We're only loving certain parts. It's a conditional love. And then this shatters our perception, not only of ourselves, but the rest of the world. And then it teaches us to really only love others conditionally. It's a practice. Every single day we practice loving all the aspects of who we are. This reminds me of certain times in my life when I just got so sick of myself. I was sick of me talking about the same things all the time. I was sick of just the ways and the patterns I was seeing happening. And I think it's important to kind of get sick of ourselves sometimes, to get sick of watching the same old thing happen. But once we start to notice these things about ourselves, the things we might not be able to stand for much longer, we have a choice. We can shame ourselves, we can judge, and we can go into that inner critic, and that's not going to help. Or this is when we learn to start being loving. Louise Hay was one of my very first introductions into the personal development and spiritual work that I do. I found her book, You Can Heal Your Life, when I was about 19 years old. And she said, it's what we all wanted when we were children, to be loved and accepted exactly as we were then, not when we got taller or thinner or prettier. And we still want it, but we aren't going to get it from other people until we can get it from ourselves. And this brings me to the family of origin piece. I have this belief that our souls incarnate here and choose the particular parents that we have. And this is my belief, and I understand this one might be a bit controversial for some, but I genuinely believe that we came here and chose the parents that we have. From this perspective, if we chose our parents, it's because they had this certain set of qualities, these certain ways of being. And then that child completely forgets that they are a soul. They grow up in this crazy world and they forget, and then they take on the burden of having these annoying and frustrating parents. Just think of teenage years. And then that child forgets that they chose their parents because of those inherent qualities that they possess. So here is a practice that I have found to be super helpful. It doesn't matter how old you are. Make a list of all the qualities that you like in your mom, and then do the same for your dad. And this goes for even if you've never met your mom or your dad or they're deceased, it doesn't matter. You can find qualities about them. Trust me. It's a challenging task for many of us because here's the thing, it's so much easier for us to look at what we dislike about our lineage or about our parents or about the family of origin that we came from. It's so much easier to look and say, I've decided that I don't match up with those things and this is not who I want to be. But you see, we have inherited all of it. You became who you are despite of your parents and also because of them. And both listing out what you like about them and even what you dislike matter. We're looking at this holistic picture. We're looking to see where we came from and what we developed. And we're looking at it all with love and compassion the best that we can. We're looking at it to see where we can see ourselves in our parents, see where we can appreciate them. And often the things that you don't appreciate needed to happen so you could become the person that you are. Self-love is about recognizing ourselves in any person that we judge or blame. So we can see people as mirrors. We can see the reflection of them back to us, and we can learn to see, wow, I possess that quality too, and can I learn to love that aspect of myself? Can I appreciate it? Can I have compassion for it? The next part here is about recognizing the internal belief that I'd be happier if they were different. Or said another way, I'd be happier if they weren't in my life, or if they just were changed, then it'd be so much better. No one ever said that life wasn't going to include difficult and challenging people. For me, I learned early on that I had a lot of difficult and challenging situations and people in my life, but I had resisted it for so many years. For whatever reason, I had this core belief that I wasn't supposed to have to deal with difficult and challenging people. Some of those difficult and challenging people tended to be some of my biggest teachers. It was not my job to change them. It was my job to accept that they're just difficult and challenging people, and to even see that there's aspects of me that have been difficult and challenging at times, and that's okay. Another core truth around healing and recovering from codependency is that it's God and the universal plan to bring justice to situations or to even people. I had to remember that it's not my job to bring justice. I still need to remember this. And it's not our job to intervene in most things. Certainly there's moments that we speak up, we stand up, and we do the things that we need to do. But for the most part, it's not our job. There's a quote that I really like, and it says that you may not like the situation, but it's imperative that you like yourself in it. We remember that everyone has a right to their opinion, and you don't have to like it or agree, and they don't have to like it or agree either. And we must learn not to listen so hard when they're talking about things that we don't agree with or we don't like. Thank you to my mentor for teaching me that one. Don't listen so hard. People can talk and talk and talk. They can say all the things that they want to say, and they're allowed to. Who said it's our job to shut them up? They're allowed to say whatever they want to say. We don't have to listen so hard. That is the part that is our responsibility. We move out of our boundaries and back into codependency when we feel the need to cancel, quiet, shut up people that we don't agree with. That's not what this world is for. They might not be identical, but there's something within them that is poking at something within you that you need to look at. Byron Katie says, if I think someone else is causing my problem, I'm insane. And the reality is, no, we just needed to learn how to build up a resilience to difficult and challenging people. And so this practice leads us into something called tolerance. Tolerance is accepting differences. It can also signal our ability to accept more intimacy. And so when we're in a codependent relationship, we're actually holding ourselves back from being in a deep, intimate relationship, a co-regulated relationship. And the intimacy means that we can invite in discomfort or stress or anger, as well as positive feelings of more ease and joy and bliss and love. One of the things that I like to say in my head, I affirm, and you can affirm it with me, the more I let go, the better I feel. The more I let go, the better I feel. The most important thing to remember as I wrap up this video today is that you must practice these tools every single day. Recovery and healing around codependency, to me, is a lifelong practice. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment below. I always love hearing from you, and make sure you subscribe so you can be the first to hear when the next videos come out every single week. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.